everyone, Tams here. Welcome back to the continued and part 2 discussion of fountain pens with @Legally Inked. Legally Inked is my friend Tracy Lee. She is on Instagram as Legally Inked, and she has a very impressive fountain pen collection. So if you missed part 1 of the interview, be sure to check it out. I will link it below. And let's move on to part 2 and talk more about inks and fountain pen accessories. So what in the world do you do with all these fountain pens?
Well, I'm one of these crazy people who keeps at least 24 of them inked all the time. I carry them every day. They go to work with me. I use them to take notes in meetings. I use them to write to dozens and dozens and dozens of pen pals. So I am constantly writing. I journal. So I use them for just about everything, all day, every day.
I noticed that you have a ton of inks in your ink collection. They're gorgeous. What do you actually look for in inks?
I have a lot of green. I have more green than I should have. So I do tend to first look for color. In the last year or so, I've developed a love for orange. Never paid attention to orange before, and there's fabulous orange inks on the market. So I look for a very strong color, very bright color. I'm not a fan of, I never use black ink, never ever. It never ever. I own a bottle, but I never ever use it. I don't care for gray either. So I like some of the reddish browns and the oranges, and not a blue fan either. So the reds and the greens, of course. And so I look for a good strong color. I like inks that I don't need them to dry super fast, but I don't want them to stay wet 12 days after I've mailed a letter to somebody, so they're smearing all over the place, and there are inks that will do that. So I actually really like my Sailor, Kobe, and Bung Box inks. They are very well behaved. They have a nice flow. They have good strong color, and then they have this thing called sheen. So sheen is big on the pen world. So Instagram feeds and other places you can go to see close-up shots. So a sheen, so for example, if you use a blue ink that has a sheen, as the blue ink tends to dry, a lot of times you'll start seeing a red sheen come out of that ink, and it's sort of, you can tilt the page and suddenly the ink takes on a completely different hue. Emerald of Chivor, made by J. Herbin, is not only a glittery ink, but it is full of sheen, and so it's like this greenish, bluish, reddish, fantastic, amazing ink. I love the color, and I love how it sheens. So sheen is actually a lot of fun. It's not a big requirement, but it's fun. And shading is another thing that a lot of people look for in inks. So shading, if you were to, as you write, you'll start seeing that it maybe is darker where your pen hits the page, and then it's lighter until you change your motion and go in a different direction. It'll get dark again, and then it lightens up. And so you have this constant shifting of the color on the page, and it ends up looking beautiful, especially when you write a letter. A full page of writing with shading and sheen is wow.
What is your favorite paper for fountain pens? Because I know fountain pen people are really particular about paper.
I'm very particular about paper. So at work, just because I'm sort of on the go and it's easy to carry, I use the Circa System by Levenger, and I actually buy their Rhodia paper pre-cut. And so Rhodia paper actually holds up very well to fountain pens, including the big nib wet pens like I use. Clairefontaine is also a pretty good paper. I think sometimes it flattens the ink a little bit, takes away some of the pop of the color, but it still will hold up extremely well. But for all of my letters that I write, I use almost exclusively the Tomoe River from Japan. So in fact, I have what's left in this pad here, and then I have an entire ream in the drawer over there.
Break down the maintenance process for keeping a fountain pen. What is your process? What do you do?
Fountain pens are actually pretty easy to take care of. Sometimes you have to get yourself into a system. But typically I write my pens until they're dry, and if that takes a week, if it takes 3 months, it doesn't matter to me. Ink doesn't corrode the inside of a pen. That's what it's designed to hold. So when it's time to clean, then I typically, this is a Nakaya. So typically what I'll do is you unscrew the body of the pen, and there's the converter. You pull the converter out, and you can flush it with water to get all of the remaining ink out. The nib, which I, on this pen, leave in the section, I typically rinse it really well, and then you get, a common tool is an ear bulb like you'd use for a baby,
Mm-hmm.
and you fill it full of water, and the nozzle actually fits beautifully right on the end of the nib on the top side of the section, and you squeeze and it forces water through, which actually flushes very effectively. And then about 2 years ago I bought myself an ultrasonic cleaner, and that's what I use after that. I toss it in the ultrasonic cleaner for about 4 minutes and let it run. Really shake that anything dried or stuck right out of the nib. Sometimes I'll run it twice. And then you let it drain on a paper towel, and that pulls out any remaining inks. And then you can refill with any other color or the same color, whatever you'd like to do. So, and with the eyedroppers, which is a pen without a converter and just the body of the pen is full of ink, then you just simply unscrew the section and fill the body with water and rinse it out. I have a little bottle brush that I use to scrub the body if there's anything stuck in there. Same process with the nib, squeeze, flush into the ultrasonic cleaner, and then I change inks as necessary. So it's actually fairly easy to take care of fountain pens. And some inks you have to be more careful about than others. So you can go onto forums. Lots of people write about inks and their various qualities. But most Japanese inks are very safe. The Diamine is very safe. Diatramentis I use a lot of course Sailor Kobe, those kinds of inks, Bung Box. Very safe and very gentle on a pen.
Okay. What is a Nib Meister? What is the purpose of a Nib Meister?
Nib Meisters are awesome people, and I didn't know about Nib Meisters myself. I didn't really understand their value until a few years ago. I've had some pens that have arrived to me that I've ordered online that simply don't write well. They're scratchy, the tines are bent a little bit, the ink flow is not good, it's not wet enough. I like a good flood of ink when I write. I don't like this dry thing. So I learned that by finding a good Nib Meister, and a Nib Meister is somebody who works on fountain pen nibs, they can tweak the nib to exactly how you like to write. They can make it drier, they can make it wetter, and they can actually grind the nib and change the style of the tip and the style of the line that it lays down. So for example, when I got, this is a Florentine Hills by Visconti, and the nib was not very great when I got it. I sent it to my very favorite Nib Meister, Daniel Smith. He's the Nib Smith on the internet, and he tweaked this nib for me, got it better aligned, and it leaves a nice wet line, and it's one of the best, smoothest, most amazing nibs I have now because of the work that he has done. Whereas on a different pen, and this is a Delta, when I got the pen, I hated the nib. It was awful. It's too hard. It's just not what I expected it to be. I sent this pen to Daniel, and he actually changed it into a stub for me, and he changed the flow rate, and I actually really like the pen now. But I would have sold it if I had not sent it to a Nib Meister. I would have gotten rid of the pen. That's how much I didn't like it. So they are out there. You can Google them, and it just depends. Deb Kenny is another good Nib Meister. Mike Masuyama is very famous in the pen world, and he is often at the larger pen shows. And his queue is very long, so you have to get in his queue very early. But a lot of them, you can mail your pens to them, which is what I do with Dan. I mail my pens to him, he fixes them, sends me an invoice, and then mails them back. So it's very simple, and it's usually very quick.
Okay.
So I hope you enjoyed these interview videos. I certainly did, and I enjoyed spending the day with Tracy Lee. She has a gorgeous, gorgeous library, very inspiring. And anyway, I hope this inspires you to maybe write a letter, try out a fountain pen, or maybe attend a pen show. Thanks, guys.